Hey, what you reading for?
Hey, what's up, YouTube? I have said many times on this channel that I do not read nonfiction due to my strong aversion to reality. And while there is truth to that statement, I rarely read a work of nonfiction, and I do try to avoid reality whenever possible. However, recently, more than a few viewers have pushed back in the comment section. Michael, how can you dismiss an entire genre like that? You are so close-minded. Comb your hair, etc. So with this video, I am pushing back on some of the feedback I have received lately, and I am sharing my top 5 best nonfiction books I have ever read. There's a good variety here. There are history, science, sociology, and culture, and there's even an autobiography. So if you're one of those readers who every once in a while might brave a closer examination of reality, maybe you'll find your next nonfiction read on my list. Or maybe you're already familiar with the books I'm going to talk about, and like me, you have opinions. Either way, I look forward to your feedback in the comment section. Please give this video a like, consider subscribing. The growth of the channel helps keep me motivated to keep putting out content, and I do appreciate the support. We'll skip the intro sequence and dive right in no particular order. These are just 5 nonfiction books that I really liked. And we will start off with The Serpent and the Rainbow by Wade Davis from 1985. Wade Davis is a Canadian anthropologist, perhaps the closest thing we have to a real-life Indiana Jones. And The Serpent and the Rainbow was his first book. Researchers at Harvard who were looking for ways to treat Alzheimer's, they were interested in the zombie phenomena that was coming out of Haiti, and more specifically interested in the case of Clervius Narcisse, a man who apparently died in a Haitian hospital in 1962. He was buried, and then 18 years later, he was seen walking around Haiti a bit disoriented. The reason Harvard researchers were interested in this case is that it was their belief that in Haiti, voodoo priests sometimes conduct rituals that will leave an individual in a death-like state. The person is buried, and then someone comes along, digs them out of their grave, and the resurrected individual is now a slave and is put to work. So the researchers believe that the voodoo priest used neurotoxins in their rituals, and these neurotoxins need to be studied because they may be helpful in the treatment of Alzheimer's or in other neurological impairments. So these researchers, they elicit the help of Wade Davis to go down to Haiti, get the zombie recipe from the voodoo priest, and bring it back to Harvard to be studied. And that is the premise of the book. In order for us, the reader, to follow the narrative, we need to know a lot about natural toxins, which is fascinating. From this book, we learn a lot about botany, blowfish, and the toxicity of various legumes, which is all super interesting. Even more interesting than that was the exploration of Haitian culture and how religion and superstition are intricately weaved with politics, and how they were used to fuel the rebellion against the French, and how they continue to be used to consolidate and wield power and influence. The book is almost presented as a narrative, which makes for an easy and enjoyable read. However, there isn't really much of a story here. Wade Davis goes to Haiti, he bribes some officials, he meets a voodoo priest, he bribes the priest for the recipe, and he brings it back to Harvard, and that's it. I would say that despite how the book presents itself, if you go into it expecting a story, you might be disappointed. However, if you are interested in seeing how superstition and social dynamics and politics are manipulated, and how they are complicit in forming a fascinating backdrop for society and growth and upheavals in Haiti, The Serpent and the Rainbow is an excellent read. Next, we have Fast Food Nation by Eric Schlosser from 2001. Now, fast food restaurants are a very important part of American society, its economy, and the shaping of the day-to-day life of millions of Americans. In this book, we see how the fast food industry got its start and how it was fueled by and then tied to the growth of the automobile industry. All of that was super interesting. However, the growth of the fast food industry has had ripple effects. With the fast and impressive growth of fast food, that means that farming and the slaughtering of animals, those industries would need to undergo changes too. There is a section in the book dedicated to slaughterhouses, and this section is a tough read. It's bloody and unsettling, not only in the depiction of the treatment of animals, but also in the treatment of the immigrants who would enter the country and end up working in this extremely dangerous environment. I did find this to be a gripping read, seeing how the economic growth of one industry, how that has a ripple effect that is difficult to predict and even more difficult to control, how the growth of this industry has shaped in many ways society, not to mention the widely reported effects on public health. This book does touch on that, but its focus lies in other areas, namely the economic ramifications, labor rights, and social dynamics that the growth of this industry has spawned. Fast Food Nation, a tough read because of the disturbing passages in the slaughterhouse, but an eye-opening read and one I would recommend, especially to readers who are interested in the growth of America in the latter half of the 20th century. Next up, we have A People's History of the United States from 1942 to the present by Howard Zinn. This was originally published in 1980. However, there is an updated version that was published in 2003 because a lot happened in the United States from 1980 to 2003. They say that history is written by the victors. However, this book takes a completely different approach. This book depicts a people struggling for rights and justice in the New World. This book covers, among other topics, the slave trade, the robber barons, conflicts with natives, class struggles, the rise of the labor movement, the rise of banks and corporations, American imperialism, the rise of anarchism, the effects of World War II, the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War, feminism, etc. What I appreciated about this book is that it gave me another idea of the US. I had always seen the US as some kind of new libertarian, ultra right-wing social experiment, but actually it's far more nuanced than that. And this book presents a different side to American history, one that I was not really familiar with, one that I don't always associate with the United States, focusing on the struggle for rights and equality and fighting against the oppressive designs of capitalism. It is a very left-leaning book. It almost acts as a nonfiction companion read to Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, another book that I really loved. I thoroughly enjoyed The People's History of the United States, even though I might be too cynical to share in the optimism that the book expresses. Nevertheless, a great read. Next up, we have A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking from 1988. This was an important book for me, and it came to me at just the right time in my life. As a young man, I had some rather silly notions, stupid notions actually. My passion was music. In fact, it was more than a passion. It was my whole life. I wanted to compose, orchestrate, conduct, perform, record music. And I thought that people could be divided into two groups. You have the creatives, your painters, composers, writers, and then you have your non-creatives, your scientists, business people, bureaucrats, etc. So I pretty much dismiss science entirely as a non-creative pursuit that was for other people, for the non-creatives, and not for a creative like me, right? And then I read this book, and it was a game changer. This book allowed me to see the creative side of science, the creative side of the pursuit of knowledge and understanding, to imagine what lies beyond the borders of sight, what lies beyond the limits of our understanding, to imagine and then postulate laws that define the parameters of the physical world. And it doesn't stop there. We need creativity to construct experiments to test these hypotheses. This book focuses on black holes, which are fascinating in and of themselves. But in doing so, it showed me the influence, the need actually, for imagination in the pursuit of knowledge. Great book, and one that was instrumental in shaping me into the kind of person I am today. And the last book I want to tell you about today is Hallelujah, Junction by John Adams from 2002. John Adams is an American composer. In fact, one of his pieces that was written for string quartet is called Fellow Traveler, the opening of which is what I use for the introduction of a lot of my videos. I'm a huge John Adams fan. In fact, a few decades ago actually, John Adams was coming to Europe to conduct the European premiere of his latest oratorio, The Gospel According to Mary. So naturally I got tickets, and I went with a friend of mine who was a music critic, so she had access and connections in this world. So we go to the concert hall, we see the performance, it's spectacular, of course, and then afterwards she's like, "Hey Michael, you want to go backstage and meet John Adams?" Oh my goodness, yes. So she takes me backstage, and I got to meet John Adams, and I shake his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Adams, fantastic show." And after that, I'm like showing my friend my hand, like, "Look at this hand. This hand touched John Adams's hand. I'm never gonna wash this hand again." Now, I was only joking. I was just trying to express how excited I was and express the fanboy in me. Sadly, I would go on to wash that hand. And shortly thereafter, or shortly after the concert, a friend of mine, she gave me a gift, which was this autobiography, Hallelujah, Junction, which I read with much interest. Two things stood out to me in this book. He talks about his upbringing in New England in the 1950s, listening to Duke Ellington and how big of an influence Duke Ellington was on him and his music, which surprised me because I don't hear the influence. But apparently that was his first contact with music. He has fond memories of going to the dance halls and listening to the big band play Duke Ellington's music. And then later, as a young adult, he moved west to the West Coast and got involved in the installation art scene in San Francisco and the Berkeley area in the 1960s and 1970s. And that whole section of the book was very interesting. Because John Adams is known for many things, and he's known for integrating electronic music into the concert hall, into orchestral music. In the 1960s, electronic music was only starting to be experimented with, and this was before synthesizers and samplers. So what he and his peers would have to do is they'd have to literally construct these giant machines with wires running everywhere, running through amplifiers and filters and envelopes and things like that. And they'd have to build these machines, these works of art actually, themselves, these machines that produce noise and produce sound and allow them to control the sound that was being produced. So they weren't simply musical instruments, but they were installation pieces, works of art, and how this development of electronic music was helped or what formed an integral part of installation art movement in California in the 60s. And that was very interesting. In fact, I would say to enjoy Hallelujah Junction, you kind of need to be a John Adams fan, I would think. But if you've never heard of John Adams, but you're really interested in installation art, especially in its formative years in the 60s in the San Francisco, Berkeley area, I think even if you're not a John Adams fan, but you're a fan of that world, I think you could get a lot out of this book, Hallelujah, Junction. So there you have it. Those are my favorite nonfiction books I have ever read. Do you have any experience with the books or authors I talked about in this video? I look forward to connecting with you in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.